Hey everyone, and welcome to this webinar with the CEO of RegScale, Travis Howerton, and the Chief Security Officer, Dale Hoke. I'm Art Coviello. I'm the chairman of the board of RegScale and the managing director of Sin Ventures, our investors in RegScale. Let me just start the conversation by saying why we at Sin Ventures invested in RegScale. I had the opportunity when I was running RSA to acquire the leading GRC, governance, risk, and compliance platform, Archer, and we were able to grow that business significantly post acquisition, and Archer became the standard for governance, risk, and compliance. The problem with the product that we never really were able to build off of is that Archer itself is a framework. Archer can do anything you want it to do. It's a tremendous compendium of every single compliance requirement you could possibly imagine. It's very broad in its scope, beyond security to purchasing and auditing and a host of GRC issues. And it has a fantastic following in the Archer community that keeps it alive and vibrant. But again, it's just a framework. And in looking at RegScale, and looking at what Travis was trying to do as he founded the company, it just made tremendous sense to make this investment. And I'm going to let Travis explain the value proposition, and it'll be easy for people to understand exactly why we made the investments. Travis, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to tell the audience just why you got into this business and what you saw as the problem that you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. Thank you, Art. And so my background, I spent 20 plus years in national security, retired as the first chief technology officer of the U.S. nuclear weapons program. I went to Oak Ridge National Lab and ran their IT services division for a few years, then went to Bechtel and helped lead digital transformation globally for them. The problem we found, no matter where I was, they were all ultra large, highly regulated, is you spend tons of time creating paperwork manually that nobody wants to read and nobody wants to write. But it's sort of the price of doing business. And there were tools like Archer and like ServiceNow at the time that were the leading edge tools, but they were automated in the sense that I type it into a web portal instead of Word or Excel, but still very manual, fair amount of staff revolt in how you feed the thing. And we thought there's just got to be a better way to do this. And we were looking at a couple trends in the industry that we thought we're just going to break the Gen 1 GRC providers, which were great tools in their time, but we thought times were changing in a way that was going to make it difficult for them to thrive in the future. And the first is we thought by 2030, all new software would be cloud native. So it would spin up and down on demand. Even if it's not running in the cloud, it's going to be running in containers because the unit economics make so much sense. And we thought it would go from frustrating to do manually in a static client server world to stupid and not fit for purpose in a cloud native world. Like it just won't work anymore. At the same time, you're dealing with this explosion of regulations, from AI laws to supply chain mandates to privacy mandates that are just stacking on a fixed number of humans in a cost center in a way that's not sustainable. And then Moore's law is going to make you go faster. And so we thought, which of the Gen 1 GRC tools can hit a moving target at twice the scope at 4 to 8 times the speed by 2030 to support the highly regulated use case? And we thought, well, none of them could. And so that's why we built RegScale the way we did. We started with the foundation of compliance as code. So imagine instead of dealing with policies in SharePoint and PDF documents and websites, they're all machine readable and you could pull them the same way you would code and Git. That would feed your automation systems that you already have for continuous monitoring, and you would get self-updating paperwork out the other side. And so that was the initial value prop for RegScale. What we found is that just adds to the list of problems you don't have enough humans to fix. And so just pointing out how bad you suck at something isn't a valuable exercise. You actually need to fix it. That's where we added a fleet of AI agents that do things humans would do faster than the humans can. I need to develop documentation to get in prod, we'll write it for you. I need to audit, we'll audit it for you. I need to do a risk assessment, we'll do that too. Right. And so we just added persona-based agents. They just pull tons of pain out of the process. And that was really what we were trying to do, is fix this problem of we spend more time in many cases describing our security system than we do actually doing the security engineering. And that's insane. And right, we just wanted to put a dent in that problem. And so we've been excited to build RegScale and help move the industry forward there.
And that's really what we saw at Sin Ventures and what I saw personally, having acquired Archer when I was CEO of RSA. And it's really the automation of the process and the elimination of time and energy and people's work more than any other factor that really drew us to you guys. And having looked at companies like Drata and Vanta, which were more single or maybe a couple of purposes, what drew us to RegScale was the pure comprehensiveness of the platform. So talk a little bit more about the use cases, Travis, if you will, as you kind of touched on in your earlier comment.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned, Archer's a framework, right? We wanted to do something a little different. And so we thought about RegScale as a purpose-built operational risk tool for the CISO that bridges security, risk, and compliance in a single platform, which is just fundamentally different. It needs to work out of the box. It needs to connect all the things you already have, and it needs to have rapid time to value, not be a science experiment to go build something in some of these other tools that they're great frameworks, but some assembly is required, right? So we just wanted it to just work. And we had a couple of key use cases, sort of the core GRC policy risk governance use case. We kind of started there. So in the government, it might be ATO automation, it might be FedRAMP, PCI, HIPAA, NERC, pick a regulation. We support almost any of them you can think of in the cyber world. We then went into enterprise risk modeling of how do you basically do risk roll-ups, risk assessment? So instead of having a compliance view of the world, how do you have an outside-in attacker's view of your infrastructure and then ensure your controls are sufficient to meet the threat environment that you're operating in? So that's our enterprise risk tool. The third thing was trying to be secure from the first line of code to running at scale. Then we started building our CI/CD integration. So now every time you build your software, you know everything that was in it, the software bill of materials, the vulnerabilities, any issues with it. So those things never even make their way to prod and you can shift your program left. And then lastly is our third party risk. Now that my internal house is in order, how do I push it out to my vendors, my suppliers, and ensure they're meeting their obligations for people that I'm entrusting with their data? And so that's the RegScale platform today. It's a holistic solution. It's a platform with multiple products that help you bridge security, risk, and compliance all together in one tool for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people misunderstand about RegScale because they think just in terms of ensuring compliance or proving compliance when it has so many other security and risk oriented capabilities and value. And it also solves discrete problems like a particular bank that we have as a customer had something called an MRA, a matter requiring attention from the regulators around identity that you helped solve is one. And then the most recent one was the Department of Homeland Security helping them with some of their DOJ compliance requirements. Maybe you could touch on those two as really specific use cases for the product.
The first one I think of more as removing the corrosion in the gears of GRC, where it seems like it should all be put together, but all the data is in silos and we send people out on rounds to do stuff manually and feed the monster and they make mistakes and it doesn't get done and people leave and there's all sorts of ways to screw it up and it just doesn't really work well together. That was that banking use case. They had actually multiple GRC tools, but they didn't talk to each other. The business units didn't interact in real time to solve the problem. And so all we did was sort of in that case, we sat between them in our GRC mesh architecture, and we just made sure all the data flowed down the highway at light speed versus having to do it manual and hope that you get it all. And really what that's allowed that financial services institution to do is prove that they're always audit ready. So instead of doing massive work to try to get to there, they know they're always in a good state. They can see the data at any point in time and all those manual things go away. The large government agency one, you mentioned DOJ, the Department of Government Efficiency. This is just a cost takeout play and something that will surprise no one. In many areas of the government, they're not that efficient. They still use old technologies. Some of that old technology is basically humans with pieces of paper that they fill out manually. And one of those processes that I think is the most broken in government is the ATO or authority to operate. So in this use case, the average ATO process is about $1 million. It takes months, if not years, to get this process done by hand. And meanwhile, the technology's moving at light speed. It's out of date the moment you wrote it. It cost a ton of money to do it. It makes the government always behind, and we pay an absolute fortune. I tell everybody it would be cheaper to buy everybody on the project team a Bentley than it is to ATO a piece of software I need to use in the government, which is just insane. And so what we showed them is an AI-based way of automating all this end to end, reducing their reliance on system integrators and consultants to do all this stuff by hand at $100, $200 an hour for months and months and months at a time. And so we're doing our part to help in government efficiency and pull costs out and help bring parts of the government into sort of the modern technology era.
Yeah, one of the other areas that you touched on was FedRAMP. Speaking of taking millions of dollars and months, if not years of time to achieve. And we'll get into the press release we announced today of RegScale achieving FedRAMP High, which almost nobody achieves. But before we do that, I'd like to talk to you about another use case, which is a particular technology company that was trying to achieve FedRAMP that we helped automate that process.
And it's very similar to that government ATO process. If you think of FedRAMP as just a specialized ATO for cloud, and all an authority to operate is the government saying before you store, process, or transmit any sensitive data, we need to ensure you meet all the appropriate security controls, have done a risk assessment, and you have sort of sufficient protections to ensure that data is protected throughout its life cycle. So it's good security practice. Other sectors would call it different things. The government calls it an ATO. But on the FedRAMP ATO, we were helping a large technology company go through their process, and they just have a ton of scale. And when you think about all the different teams that have to interact, that have to ship paper around, that have to update spreadsheets, it's almost an unmanageable project management exercise to try to do that at manual means at this company's scale. And so what we gave them was a dynamic portal. They connect it to their tools. Everything kind of lights up green, yellow, or red based off what it sees. They can burn it down. Teams can collaborate across their components of the application, and it all rolls up to a set of artifacts they can submit in a more timely manner. So what it allowed was significant compression in the project schedule, significant cost reduction. And really, why does anybody do FedRAMP? It's not because we enjoy creating massive amounts of paper for the government. It's because we want access to the biggest market in the world. And the price of admission to that market, if you want to go to Disneyland, you need a FedRAMP. And so we helped them get their pass, get it done much, much faster and cheaper than what they had budgeted for. But the real win for them is access to the market months and months and months ahead of where they would have had it. And think about all the revenue they can now generate and the moat that creates for them versus their competitors who don't have the same ticket. That's part of the value prop we were able to offer that company.
Now let's segue over to Dale, because Dale was instrumental, obviously, in helping us achieve FedRAMP and then FedRAMP High. And Dale, I'd like you to tell us about the journey and how we used our own product to help us get there. But before I do want to talk to all the CISOs out there, because they're the ones that inevitably have to get this FedRAMP approval done in their own companies. So I think Dale is an excellent spokesman for all of you in terms of how to go about this process and how to leverage RegScale's technology.
Thanks, Art. I appreciate it. So the first thing really that we did was we planned to take on FedRAMP, right? We did that with a 3-man team. So we laid out all of our governance and all of our compliance paperwork against what we assumed to be Rev 5 eventually. Then when we started to move into the AI sphere, we were able to use RegScale to write control implementation statements based off of the policy documents we already had. So we could extract the data from our existing policies and then bring that into the platform and write evidence-based control implementation statements based in fact. And then it made it very simple, because I think anybody who's ever written a security plan knows that it's a bunch of back and forth with a lot of control owners. Because we had the control owners engaged in the platform, we had automation to collect the evidence that we needed, and we had fact-based policy documents. We were able to extract that data and write the control implementation statements We took that 4-month process and broke that down into a right around 2 weeks. And that was with 2 people. Most teams are 10 or potentially 12 people, depending on the size of your company. We did that with 2 people in 2 weeks. And I think that that amount of time savings optimizes the resources for every CISO. The second big thing in the platform is we were able to do a gap analysis in the platform that would normally take something between a month or 2 months. We were able to do it in a matter of minutes using AI based on the data that we already had and scoring it against data that 3 PAOs have provided us to score against. It gave us a source of truth. So we had a good plan going into the FedRAMP package. We had the power of AI to help us expedite the writing of the package. And then we were able to, based in facts, not guessing, because we all know that a lot of these implementation statements are subjective. So we were able to remove the subjectiveness by doing an audit of ourselves prior to submitting the package, which just made it all that much faster.
So Travis, obviously you had more than a little bit of a vested interest in overseeing this process that Dale ran. Tell us about your point of view versus your own knowledge about how long these processes to get to FedRAMP High would normally take a technology company, and from start to finish. Tell us about the RegScale journey as Dale just explained.
We had to kind of think through sort of the go no go decision. It's interesting how many founders I talk to in the Sin portfolio and other companies that kind of struggle with, they want access to this federal market or they find an exciting opportunity, but just the sheer scale of what it means to get a FedRAMP just pushes people away from even trying in that market. And at the end of the day, we said, look, we got a platform that can automate this end to end. The best proof point we can give the market is to show we got our own FedRAMP on our own platform and to basically show our work at the end of how fast we got it done. And Dale said, I can do it. And so we just hopped to it. We went straight into like the unbearable number of controls in document dev, where normally you might bring in an advisory firm and pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars for 6 months to develop all the paperwork. Our AI wrote most of that for us in the first couple of hours. Then it was turning it from a work of fiction into nonfiction, which is the actual security engineering you need to do to get to this standard. And that's where the value is in FedRAMP, is it forces you into basically cybersecurity operational excellence. It pushes you to up level. The doc dev work is just a pain in the butt, right? We just take that out. And then the second part is it's very frustrating to be on the development engineering team to have Dale scream at you at the end about everything you did wrong, because you didn't do it wrong on purpose. You're not a cyber expert. Our auditor could look at the whole package, grade every control A to F and the amount of time it takes you to go to the Keurig and back. And I know exactly where I'm stand and I can get ahead of that. It made it more like an open book test. And because of all that, we're able to greatly accelerate our progress in the platform. And we were able to do it without asking for a huge amount of budget at the board level. I didn't have to stick my hand out for a big check, Art, on that side.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we were able to work it in, right? And I came from 20 years where that wasn't possible. There was no hope. Like the only way to do this was to throw bodies at the problem. Now there's automation solutions to this based off AI, based off compliance as code, and it offers huge cost reductions and huge schedule compression, which Dale was able to directly achieve on our behalf. And so it's a combination of our software with Dale's expertise and leadership to take on that challenge that got us to the other side in record time. No, and if you think about like the biggest GRC tool in the history of the world isn't at the level we are as a Series A company from a cyber standard. That is an attestation to what the platform can offer.
I also find it ironic that I think it took somewhere, Dale, between 2 and 3 times the amount of time for the government to audit your results as it did for you to get it to qualification. Is that right?
That is correct. So the audit piece was longer than it took for us to write the package. I will say that the FedRAMP 20X process shortened the verification piece, but if the government was using RegScale to audit it, we'd have been a lot faster.
So there's an expression that companies in tech often use, which is they're eating their own dog food. In the case of RegScale, we call it sipping our own champagne. So, Travis, it's been a delight having this conversation. But before we leave it, I'd like to give you another opportunity to talk about the number of vertical industries, in addition to government, obviously, and financial services that you believe RegScale can offer help to.
And so when we talk FedRAMP, you get sort of that connotation that this is just for the government, but it really isn't. What it is the gold standard in security, and it's the highest watermark you can achieve in security validation. And the government's not the only vertical that cares about that. Financial services and the largest money center banks, having these reps and certs opens access there. Same thing with utilities, with high tech companies who do business in those areas, in healthcare with HIPAA and High Trust, PCI and Cyber Risk Institute, CRI, on financial services side. The use cases are directly applicable. And at the end of the day, when you talk about bridging security risk and compliance, we have an awful lot of the most sensitive data from some of the most security conscious companies in the world running in RegScale. And the only way they put that data in your platform is if they know they can trust it. FedRAMP High, in achieving that level, that's good enough for the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security and these super high security environments, just says we could push that level of security out into all these other verticals as well. So there's a lot of other places that are adopting complex retail, telecom. If you're highly regulated and you want to find a way to get out of the manual work, because for me, this is just the work nobody wants to do. Because paperwork nobody wants to read, nobody wants to write. And if you enjoy this kind of work, I feel like your brain's miswired. You're some sort of masochist where you hate yourself just a little bit, right? And we can make that part that sucks about doing the job go away. So you can focus on operational excellence and driving your program forward and just let the paperwork take care of itself.
Yeah, I'd also be remiss if I didn't bring up the use of AI and our RegScale native architecture. You might want to comment on those and how we use standards in the work that we do.
From the beginning, we started with compliance as code, getting your requirements as close to the developer experience as possible so they move at the same speed. Now, every time we build software at RegScale, Dale knows exactly what's happening. He knows what was in it, what vulnerabilities it has, security hotspots, all these tools that are looking. He's got a real-time heads-up display of exactly what's happening on every build. That level of insight was impossible before RegScale. But it started with this foundation of compliance as code. Another one of our principles, in addition to trust, that you don't put your sensitive data somewhere you don't trust, was you should leverage open standards, because this is a market that's evolving rapidly. And so you want to build on something that is an open standard that's embraced by the community. So from OSCAL to software bill of materials to the open cybersecurity schema framework, OCSF, RegScale is built entirely on compliance as code open standards. And we built the world's first translation engine between them so that it all just works. And what that means for customers is it kind of future proofs you. Anyone who's implementing these standards, which is most of the biggest tech companies, should just plug and play in the architecture. That was our solution from day one. Make it compliance as code, make it open standards, and make it move at the same speed as your DevOps program.
And Dale, I'll give you one last bite at the apple. As a CISO and longtime practitioner yourself, tell us how you feel about using RegScale in your day-to-day work as a CISO.
As a practitioner using RegScale, to me and a CISO, it is a force multiplier. It takes my small team and makes them look bigger. The goal for and kind of the message that I get from a lot of CISOs is the goal is not so much compliance anymore or security. It's taking good security and getting compliance from that, which to me is cyber resiliency. How in an enterprise network do I show my cyber resiliency? And everything that we've done, from automated evidence collecting to DevSecOps evidence capturing, into real-time capturing of scans, into compliance as code and policy as code, the use of AI, this all brings to bear the continuous state of resiliency and the state of my controls in my environment. I can actively combat control drift, right, through the use of these tools that we've been talking about. And I have I've moved from a point in time assessment into a near real time assessment, and it enables me, as a cybersecurity company and a relatively small one, right? We still have a large footprint that we need to cover. So with a small team and a well organized plan, I can do the exact same work that a company of 300 or 400 people can do with a smaller footprint.
And at the end of the day, as having been a vendor in security now for longer than I care to admit, and investing in multiple security companies as Sin Ventures is a dedicated security fund, I've always viewed compliance as a byproduct of really good security. And you just made the point eloquently for the CISO community that what RegScale does is help you manage risk every bit as much as it helps you prove compliance.
Yes, sir. I agree with that statement entirely.
Travis, the last word from you.
One, just a thank you to Dale and team for getting us to our FedRAMP high authorization. This is a major milestone for us. We've talked about being the most secure next generation cyber GRC CCM platform in the market. Now we got the reps and certs and the receipts to go with it. And that's a credit to the R&D team that built the platform and to Dale and the security team who put it together and to Art and the investors who backed us from the beginning. We think we've positioned ourselves as the most secure solution in the market, and we're excited to see what it does for our growth and our customers going forward.
Well, congratulations, guys, and couldn't be more proud.